Ukraine also struck the Oman refinery. It stopped producing gasoline and diesel. Oman? You mean the Omsk? Hell yeah, brother. The oil crisis, or the fuel crisis, is finally really hitting Russia. Apparently, more than half the country is experiencing shortages right now. They're trying to hold it off in Moscow at the moment, but it's only a matter of time.
As Vladimir Putin makes a statement with his barrage of deadly strikes on Kyiv, the Russian leader is now facing trouble at home, as we hear from CNN's Claire Sebastian.
Two women screaming at each other over a spot in line at a Moscow gas station. Scenes like these are becoming more common as intensifying Ukrainian drone attacks have caused fuel shortages and panic buying. Well, CNN's analysis has found that at least 50 of Russia's regions, well over half, are now officially reporting supply problems. Unofficial reports coming from almost everywhere else. Lines outside gas stations forming from Moscow to Siberia. And here in the southern Krasnodar region...
They might really be reaching collapse at this point. A country like Russia, I mean, like, once you're out of fuel, that's pretty much it. It's like running out of food. Once your reserves are tapped, kind of...
emerged, showing two women berating a man for filling up a gas canister. Authorities have banned this in multiple regions to prevent stockpiling. Well, other Russians are coping with humor, turning hours-long waits into makeshift tailgate parties, joking that the best place for a date night is waiting for a fuel tanker to...
Yeah, lovely. You see the length of some of these fuel lines? Oh my god. This is the future for the US? Yeah, peer into the void, folks. Peer into your own future. Jesus Christ. This is like the law. We've already wrapped around the earth. What causes the fuel line like that? That being the only gas station in the area that actually has any. Atamenovka Zabaikasky Kray. A Russian driver leaves the gas station after finally refueling following a 28-hour wait. She remarks that when she first joined the line, it was much shorter. Jesus Christ. Shouldn't have invaded Ukraine.
Arrive, and that Russia's most expensive perfume is now gasoline. Well, this is getting so much attention that even Putin...
Such a disgusting country.
...had to address this, warning that Ukraine's attacks are not just about causing physical damage, but about what he called an information operation.
In order to, at minimum, create uncertainty for us, or even better, to...
Did you guys see that report that, like, Putin was, like, talking to his cabinet and shadow directing the war? Like, he was directing a fake version of the war. Did you see that? Where he spent, like, 10 minutes detailing military advances in regions that weren't real? Like, he was just saying shit?
Lead to a schism in Russian society.
All this could add to Russia's economic pain. Higher fuel prices mean higher inflation. But there is no evidence yet that it's going to convince Putin to stop the war.
Let's focus in on
it's not really
Ukraine's mission, Ukraine's refinery-focused drone campaign. What does Ukraine achieve with this battlefield strategy?
Ukraine has surprisingly achieved quite a lot if we consider that Russia is the largest producer and exporter of oil.
Here we go. Bad source for the info, but it's just a screenshot of the article. The direction of Rubtsky on the left bank of the Stare Oskol River we have nearby practically blocked a mixed group of enemy forces, around 5,000 troops who are now pressed up against that river, Putin said, apparently reading from a screen that stood over the interviewer's right shoulder. Only about 2 kilometers remain until their final encirclement, a problem that our 144th Division is working to solve. He carried on like this for nearly 10 minutes, at one point listing the number of houses that remain unconquered in one village in eastern Ukraine, a place the average Russian does not care about, will never visit, and would have trouble finding on the map. Putin appeared to be making up facts as he went along. No encirclement around Rubtsky, population 350, has been reported by any reliable source in Russia or Ukraine, and there is no river called Stare Oskol in that region. The Russian president's obsession with the details of the fighting appears to have crossed the line into delusion. I mean, he could just be trying to, like, wow people, or maybe he's delusional and they're just feeding him bad information. This is like Hitler waiting for Steiner to make a counterattack while Berlin was surrounded. Yeah, literally, man. It's so fucking funny. Fascism and self-defeating, dog. It doesn't work. It doesn't work. Eventually, it always ends up like this. deliberately irrationalist movements always end up like this.
It's an enormous system of refining and transit from land and sea routes. So as a result of these sophisticated drone attacks, Ukraine has taken about 20% of oil refining capacity of Russia. And it's because the equipment to run these stations is expensive. It's not easy to repair, but also it comes from the West, where there are sanctions imposed to limit Russia's access to any equipment related to energy sector. So this consistent attack led to shortages in many Russian regions of fuel. We already see rationing of how much civilians can purchase. They can't have canisters to fill in to store home, but also this will impact the army, first of all.
Not to bumper the expectations, but the gasoline refinery capabilities outside the frontline regions remain functioning. It doesn't matter if they don't have enough. And keep in mind, gasoline still has to be brought into Moscow and stored there. Local, like, you still need local infrastructure to support it. You can't maintain, like, all the refineries in, like, Siberia or whatever, and then hike it over 6,000 miles to Moscow, or however far it is. Let's say Russia does collapse. What happens to the people there? Revolution or mass death? Honestly, Russia has alienated the rest of the world so thoroughly, it's very possible that this time when it collapses, there's going to be, well, it happened after the Soviet Union collapsed. A bunch of people starved or killed themselves. A bunch of young girls were lost by the government and sold off into sexual slavery over into Little St. James. It happened the last time.
And this is the goal. The gasoline that is used for armored vehicles and all kinds of vehicles, the production of it dropped 25%. So much this is the problem that for the first time, Russia will have to import some of it from sea. So it's in talk with Kazakhstan and India to actually repurchase India's processed Russian oil that it's refining back into Russia.
And we've seen such, vivid depictions of this rationing. We've seen lines.
Is Vosh going to talk about the impending crop failure in Russia? Well, unfortunately, we're actually going to be, we're experiencing impending crop failure all over the world right now due to a series of extremely destructive climatic abnormalities that to our children will just be referred to as the normal climate. But yeah, no, it's going to hit them too. And unlike the United States, Russia can't afford to just buy out other countries' inventories.
Lines of Russian drivers waiting for petrol in Russian cities, along with the images of blown up Russian refineries. What has all this done to Russia's so-called energy superpower status?
Why? Clearly, it has damaged it to a large degree, and also something that Russian population could probably have not imagined. They have the flashbacks to the 90s when Soviet Union was collapsing and there was deficit of everything. So it's a strange, harbinger possibly of what awaits Russia, and people perfectly understand it. Putin will try to put up a brave show and will try to find alternative sources for this energy, but the question is whether he will have to pay hard currency for this, to which he's also running out because his war chest is drying up. We see Russia runs a huge budget deficit, more than it.
Vosh, I'm a fan from Russia, and talking about Russia like that, why conflate what the oligarchs are doing with the will of the people? I'm not sure if I have. What have I done to do that? The problem is really, like, the Russian people are super duper for one, like, Russia is borderline not a modern state. Russia, sociopolitically, is more akin to an old empire. You have two main cities, Moscow and St. Petersburg, that are primarily European, and from those centers of power, an enormous amount of influence is exerted over a wide range of territories and ethnic minorities, many of whom are not, like, happy with the government, but also they have nothing, and they're poor, and it sucks and it's cold. And unfortunately, the Russian people have never known democracy, so they don't really have, like, a strong civil society. They don't really have a good... I think that if, like, Russia had, even America, and America's civil society is not that great, but if Russia had America's civil society, I think that Putin and the oligarchs would have been out a long time ago, because American are huge treatlerites and have gotten used to a certain level of material comfort the Russian government can't provide. In other words, Americans have gotten used to a higher standard of living. The Russians just just have been eating dirt, man. It just fucking sucks over there. And they keep getting disappointed by their leadership. So a lot of them probably don't like, Vosh, you said evil country or something? Yeah, I say that about like Israel and America. I mean, Israel, as far as I'm concerned, is a cultural peer to Russia. I say it about both of them, yeah. Why blame us? We're not our country. When did I blame you? What do you mean? I'm saying how is this about us? So what am I saying? This is our future. That's true, yeah. The average Russian legit wouldn't care if Zelensky suddenly became president. I mean, given how apolitical most of the country is, yeah, it's very possible. It's just like you hear a king's been replaced. You're a medieval peasant, and then somebody's like, oi, the king's brother stormed the castle and's taken the crown. The king is dead. And you're like, damn, okay. I hope he won't raise taxes or whatever. Again, it's like politically and socially, I really do feel like Russia is much more comparable to a feudal society than a modern nation state, or certainly not nation state, a modern like entity of a state. You know, they don't even do nationalism the way that we do. Like Russia is a very racist country, but they don't do ethno-nationalism the way, like Russia's fascist and they're nationalist and they're racist, but they don't do like German style, Nazi style ethno-nationalism. They act more like an empire. It's more like the Ottomans or whatever. It's a very weird country. Honestly, it's a country burdened with 1 trillion internal contradictions because for a brief time it was a superpower and now it's like a backwards third world state with 2 real European cities in it that's held up by enormous petroleum profits. So it's like it didn't it didn't do capitalism before it attempted socialism, and then it fucked up the socialism bit, and now it regressed. But before the capitalistic, like they didn't even do liberal democracy. They keep skipping liberal democracy. You're supposed to do feudalism, liberal democracy, socialism, but they skipped from feudalism to attempted socialism, and now they've gone back from attempted socialism back over to feudalism. They're not getting a liberal democratic median. They're like allergic to it. So like there's a whole bunch of internal contradictions born of this fact. They keep doing everything out of order. Remember this article? 20% of Russians don't even have indoor plumbing. Oh no, Russia is like an unbelievably poor country outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg. Unbelievably poor. Like it's genuinely like in a lot of places, it's like West African poor. It's crazy how poor a lot of Russia is. Not good. Motivational speech to Russian cannon fodder. You will all die, but know one thing, Mother Russia will never forget. Yeah, apparently their average life expectancy after they hit the front lines is like 35 minutes.
Нас, мать Россия, никогда не забудет. Всем нам будут еще столетия нести.
You don't even get headstones. You get a zinc coffin welded shut and sent back to your mom.
Цветы к нашим именам. Каждое имя бойца будет высечено.
They don't even get that anymore? Yeesh.
На доске обелисков. Нам всем зажгут вечные огни.
Yeah. Sorry, not conscripts. They're not conscripts. They're volunteers. Because they're given like money for their family. It's like the country's so poor that like the only way for your family to not starve to death if you're one of the many poor marginalized ethnic communities in the fringes is to just send one of your sons out to die so that he gets a boatload of money from the government and some debt forgiveness. So like your family gets to eat for a couple of years or whatever, usually forced to sign the contract and all the contract money is spent on their equipment. It's grim. It's not great. But like seriously, the Russian people really should have revolted by now. They would have if there was a liberal democracy like transient step. I really do believe that. If the Russian people had ever at any point known liberal democracy, at this point all of the like outer lying regions outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg, why do I keep doing that? Whenever the like Russian soldiers show up to their door, they should just be shot. They're just numb? Yeah. Like no, genuine, like if they, I guarantee you this, if they had tasted liberal democracy at any point, every time Russian soldiers made their way to some like far off province, going door to door, getting people to sign up, every time they set up an enlistment office or whatever, the people there would just show up and shoot them to death. Russia literally does not have the ability to keep these areas under control. Like, they are burning through so many soldiers every month on the front lines with Ukraine, just feeding them to drone fire. Like, by now, they should have just been, like, the outer lying region should be in revolt. The problem is that power is so centralized in Moscow, and like that's like the only thing people see, you know? Israelis haven't even, the average Israeli has a much, for one, the average Israeli is much more politically motivated by their cause, because the average Israeli is like an ethno-nationalist fascist. And that's factually true, borne out in polling. And for two, the average Israeli does not live the life of desperate fucking poverty that the average Russian outside of Moscow or St. Petersburg does. Like, Israel is much more developed than Russia is. They have free healthcare. Well, I guess to some extent Russia does too. There's a very like wide gulf between the life experience of the average Israeli versus the average Russian. Also, Russia is way more fragmented. Israel's tiny. Like, the whole nation of Israel is like fucking 2 LA counties next to each other. Whereas Russia's the biggest country in the world, which means that you'd think regional control from Moscow should be weaker in the fringes, but, you know. I guess one of the reasons it's difficult to do breakaway states in, like, across Russia is that most of these places can't sustain themselves with agriculture. Like, a big problem that, like, breakaway Siberia would have is that the people there would just fucking starve. Like, the only way people could survive in Siberia before, you know, before, like, the Soviet expansion or the Russian Empire or whatever is, literally, like, they hunt seals or whatever. You can't fucking grow shit there. Guess you can a little bit, but yeah, it's not like, can't really sustain the population over there. So if they broke away, I don't, they would just like starve, I guess. You can grow grain in Siberia. Yeah, you can. I'm just saying that they wouldn't be able to self-sustain.
As expected. So all of this creates really a crunch time for Russia. And especially, let's recall that there will be so-called sham Duma elections, where one way or the other, Putin will have to show up the brave face, telling how this war is going in his favor, which obviously the Russian citizens perfectly understand it is not.
This is, as you put it, crunch time for Russia and for Putin, but is there a danger that Russia's fuel crisis actually could rally the public around the Kremlin instead of turning them against it?
There's always the risk of that, and a nation under any attack is rallying around the flag. There are two questions. One, how long they can sustain this rally, and let's, you know, as I've said, the Ukrainian strikes on Russia, when Russian population started feeling it, is now lasting more than a year and a half. And furthermore, it's attacking Moscow, the heartland of Russia. And also, let's remember, in Russia, it's the economic elite, it's a security elite that also has a huge influence. And if they see things happening, especially in Crimea, somewhere where the fuel shortages are the worst, because it's a peninsula, it relies heavily on everything.
A huge meeting of NATO allies this week, taunting the NATO allies. Clearly, the White House says, though, Trump will meet with Ukrainian.
What do you think Putin's going to do? I don't know. Go live in Tel Aviv or whatever.
And President Zelensky, with the way things are going.
That was just a third collapses 2 years ago. That is up significantly like a rocket to 60% now, nearly doubling in just the past 2 years. This war...
Only 60% of Russians say the economy is getting worse right now in 2026. Genuinely, what do you even do with this population?
And of course, all of the sanctions that go with it have had a tremendous impact on Russia's economy, and you can see it here. The people inside of Russia are not liking the way that the economy is going, and for the first time that we've really seen in recent memory, the pessimism is sky high.
This is a terrible number for
guys. I live in a 300K border city in Russia. We literally have LGBT people, cosplay fans, anime fans, VTuber fans. Oh, trust me, I know there are plenty of anime fans from Russia. I've been online. 30% of new generations know English. We're just occupied by tyrants in the Kremlin. I'm not saying Russians aren't people, dog. To be clear, I have always been sympathetic to people who, are, you know, dislike their autocratic regime but still live under it. What I'm saying is that if the Russian people were not so politically apathetic, the regime out of Moscow would have collapsed by now because regions outside of Moscow and St. Petersburg would have revolted. I did it again. Why do I keep doing that? I don't know. St. Petersburg, burger, America, burger. I'm not saying Russians aren't like people or that they, all love the regime or whatever. It's just that, Russia does not have the ability militarily to suppress mass discontent, and there should be, mass discontent. Oh, for sure, my love. Burger.
Leader
Correct.
anywhere, that is an awful number of people clearly dissatisfied. I do want to ask you about what's happening inside of Ukraine, and knowing that President Trump is going to meet with NATO allies. He is on the way to Turkey to do that. How much sway does he have with the Ukrainian public?
Yeah, okay, so, it takes two to tango, or three in this case, the U.S., Russia, and Ukraine, and you can see the domestic U.S. leadership was on the positive side of the ledger at plus 3 points. Look at how this number has absolutely fallen through the floor to now negative 72 points. That is a 75-point switcheroo in the wrong direction. So, look, Trump is going to try and pressure Zelensky to make a deal in the same way he'll try and pressure Putin to make a deal. But Zelensky be like, hey, I'm not going to feel any pressure from my folks if Trump is putting pressure on me because my folks just don't trust U.S. leadership.
Right, and there's a reason for that. Some of the comments that Trump has made, some of the niceties with Russia.
Russian attacks continue to strike fear around Ukraine's capital. 7 people were killed in a suburb of Kyiv on Monday. 29 others were injured, including 4 emergency responders. Meanwhile, the Ukrainian military...
A place without tourists, gas, power, affordable food, and the land bridge to it, already itself a tough place to live in.
Russian occupation of Crimea is such a gift to Ukraine, because at this point, if you live in Crimea, you deserve whatever comes to you. Dog, Russia sends tourists over there? Like, people in Russia are like, a warm weather port. I'm gonna wear a palm hat. And they go down over there even though there's no fucking gasoline. Like, at this, past a certain point, you're just asking for it.
It's less worth the cost. And this is the wider point for Kiev. Seize on the growing questions inside Russia as to what the war is even for. If Crimea is effectively uninhabitable and the only gains they can claim are tiny bits of land, usually rubble, in the Donbass, turn Crimea from a jewel in Putin's crown to leverage for Ukraine.
The people in Crimea are like Israeli settlers. Like, a lot of the Russians moved over there because they were like, yummy, conquest. Ooh, yes, colonial conquest. Look at all this former Ukrainian land that we've annexed. And I don't know. I feel like they kind of deserve it a little bit.
Perhaps in any future peace talks, or even into a damaging thorn in Putin's side as he tries to navigate growing dissent about his war of choice.
President Zelensky has made a fresh plea for more air defense missiles. Whatever NATO allies decide will be key to Ukraine. To elaborate on that, specifically as it relates to what we're seeing in Crimea.
Using that also to gain leverage. And lastly is the deep strike campaign into Russia.
I have a friend who lived in Crimea since before the occupation. He's been anchored there by uni stuff, but he's very opposed to the Russian government. That fucking sucks. That really does. You got to get the fuck out of Crimea, dude. That entire place is going to be rubble soon.
Russian energy export infrastructure, Russian fuel refineries.
There's no fuel there.
Russia's undergoing a fuel crisis.
Else in the future. That would be a life changer and our people. And this has been a case for us since the day one, because Russia would not stop unless they are stopped. We have proved that by the fact. And we are hoping that finally the leaders of the world will realize that.
Why is it popular leftist streamers say, you can just say Hassan, say Obama allowed Putin to take Crimea? Genuinely, Obama's response after the taking of Crimea was pretty disappointing. It has been obvious since at least 2008 that Putin had expansionist ambitions, was militarily aggressive, was illiberal, and was willing to use military force to take what he wanted. And it was a combination of poor coordination and planning from the West, a lack of proper support for Ukraine, and also I would say pretty moderate condemnation. Russia just straight up annexed a neighboring European country. It was really bad in 2014. It was really bad. And it should have been a huge warning sign. And I think a lot of this could have been prevented if the West had responded more rationally to Russia in the lead up to it, you know? Obama did have a whole 6 years prior to the annexation of Crimea to establish, I think, a broader pushback to, you know, the colonial ambitions of Russia. Though I doubt a lot of people would have guessed it would get this bad, like a full-on ground invasion lasting years and years. It's probably not great. In fairness, though, I think that America is less responsible for this than Europe is. Germany, like, forcing additional reliance on Russian natural gas, and Europe broadly just not building out a more robust electrical grid contributed to a whole bunch of reliance on Russia. And a lot of that reliance was prompted by, like, Russia compromised politicians. Like, there were politicians in Europe who were effectively Russian assets who were deliberately hamstringing their own national grid development. Yeah, Merkel is hugely responsible for this, in order to make the West more dependent on fossil fuel companies in Russia. All of this contributed massively to what happened. Also, a lot of stuff, you know, shock doctrine. It's a whole bunch of stuff. Also, yeah, Biden should have allowed Ukraine to strike inside Russia way earlier. This war might have ended like years earlier if Ukraine had been given the immediate A-OK to start striking refineries and so on. Street interviews in Russia.
Life is lousy, very hard. War, brother, war. Everything goes there.
I lived alone, but it is somehow easier with a man.
There are very few easily available women now.
The economy is good and the salary is quite decent too. Of course, it would be better to move to Europe.
And in principle, regarding the standard of living in the country, how would you rate it?
Life is crap.
Change through trade is a German doctrine when it came to the ex-USSR states, and it didn't work. Yeah, it turns out it doesn't work when change through trade doesn't mean forming robust interconnected economic ties, but rather just means buying fuckloads from the, like, oligarch-owned, state-sanctioned fossil fuel companies. Obviously. Yeah, there's a difference between change through trade in the form of, like, mutual investment and let's just give fuck tons of money to, like, Saudi Aramco, but in Russia.
Very hard. I don't know. For me, it's tough. I've been through a lot.
Can you share what you went through? Well, if you are allowed to talk about it.
Yeah, this man's 35 years old.
Life was wonderful back in my day. As for the younger generation, I think it is quite tough.
Have you heard that the approval rating of the authorities and the president in particular has been falling lately?
No, I haven't heard.
Haven't you heard?
I'm not interested in that.
And what do you think this might be connected to?
War, brother.
Okay, but Biden cockblocked the peace treaty in 2022. You mean the peace treaty where Russia invaded Ukraine and then the peace treaty where Russia got to keep the land that they conquered and also, like, demilitarized Ukraine? That peace treaty? I think Ukraine didn't want that one.
War. Everything goes there. Soon the old will be gone. The disabled will be gone. Soon you will go to war. If it lasts until then.
How would you rate the standard of living in the country? Could you explain what that's like?
And the economy is good and the salary is quite wonderful too. Living is comfortable accordingly. Well, of course it would be better to move to Europe. Well, because you still need to see the world.
It's really difficult to get a read from these street interviews because a lot of these people probably think that they're being interviewed by a fucking, like, undercover agent. You know what I mean?
Почему частники могут привезти бензин и втридорого продавать, а государство не может? У нас столько заводов нефтяных, а цена растет. Президент наш должен думать чем-то, наверное, в конце концов. Ну, я стараюсь.
There was a clip of a Russian guy buying gas. The lady said you can only have 20 liters. The guy asked what's up with the restrictions, and the lady going, it's not restrictions, I'm not allowed to say that word.
Замечать, потому что меня это расстраивает. Раз война, надо помогать. Если я сейчас назову, а вы это покажете, мне завтра придут, руки-ноги скрутят.
Oh, yeah, well, there you go.
Бензин у нас, такое впечатление, не в России добывает нефть, а где-то мы закупаем. Но эту совесть пора у правительства быть. У нас столько заводов нефтяных, а цена растет. А бензин за собой тащит все. Продукты, все, это не очень хорошо, не очень приятно. Президент наш должен думать чем-то, наверное, в конце концов. Это некрасиво, это просто некрасиво.
It took minimal territory that was filled with Russians to begin with. Dog, why the fuck would Ukraine ever accept a peace deal that legitimized Russia's conquest of the Donbass? Why would they ever do that? Why, like literally, why the fuck would they ever do that?
Почему частники могут привезти бензин и втридорого продавать, а государство не может обеспечить транспорт?
Yeah, no security guarantees, demilitarization. Nah, fuck that.
Этого бензина. Это очень странно.
Что думаете про рост цен в последнее время, особенно рост на бензин?
To stop the dying? Damn, that's crazy. Maybe Russia shouldn't have done the invasion then. I'm sorry, like Ukraine is winning this war. Russia is losing far more people. Do you want to do appeasement every time a neighboring dictatorship decides to annex your territory? Every time a bigger, scarier country invades, you're like, well, don't want to go to war to defend our territory. Might as well just hand it over.
Ну, ничего не думаю. Раз война, надо помогать. Ну, их хохлы бомбят, конечно, НПЗ.
То есть думаете, что со специальной военной операцией, в принципе, рост связан?
Ну, естественно.
Ага. А видели недавно письмо Зеленского, которое он направил Путину, нет?
Нет.
Как вам кажется, можете...
Sure, but I don't give a fuck about state sovereignty. Dog, the reason fascist dictatorships invading their neighbors is bad isn't because you respect state sovereignty. My opposition to Nazi Germany annexing, like, France was not because I respected France's state sovereignty. It was because a fascist dictatorship was doing land grabs. You don't want that. It's not good. Nobody wants that. No political ideology wants that except for the fascist land grabber. You don't want that.
Кризис дойти до нас.
Все возможно.
Угу. Ну, то есть, в принципе, не опасаетесь, да, что... Угу.
Нисколько.
А вы транспортом пользуетесь, своим личным?
Да.
Угу. Не заметили рост цен?
Ну, я стараюсь не замечать, потому что меня это расстраивает.
Что мы можем с этим сделать, как граждане?
Как граждане, не знаю, работать, платить налоги.
Мы видим сегодня и понижение заработных плат. Я по себе даже, в бюджетной сфере, да, учителя и вообще финансирование сейчас. С учетом, опять же, обстановки в стране.
Nicholas Ajay, what the fuck does that have to do with what you last said? This is what I mean about arguing with campus. They never actually stick to any one argument. They just shift between them the moment one of them is proven. Like, you were just unambiguously approving a policy of appeasement. And now that you can't defend that, you shift over to another thing. They are not winning. Dog, Ukraine is fucking bodying Russian volunteers right now. Russia's getting melted. Wait, hold on a second. This person might actually be a Russian agent. Look at this. Vosh, you don't know what you're talking about. Ukraine cut the power and water off. It was full of Russians. That's why Russia took it. You don't even have your propaganda straight. The propaganda you're supposed to say is that Ukraine launched a war of aggression on the Russian-speaking population in the Donbass, and then the liberatory force of the Donetsk and Luhansk regions attempted to retake utilities and power for their people in a sweeping democratic action. You can't acknowledge that Russia took it. You're giving me the propaganda points here. You're literally like, come on. I'm not pro-Russia. You are pro-Russia. I'm sorry. Like, I've done this too many times. It's boring for me now. Like, you are repeating Russian propaganda. You are arguing that Ukraine should have been invaded and partially annexed by a neighboring fascist country, and that they should have given up and ceded that territory to Russia because the invasion didn't go the way Russia wanted it to. You are engaging in apologia for appeasement.
Выплаты на СВО. Все это отсюда тянет.
Вы думаете, что это связанные, да, вещи?
Это связанные вещи, да.
Северные регионы, мой брат работает там цены дешевле. А у нас, вот мы, которые производим и готовим все это, у нас все дороже.
А почему?
Он объяснял, он нефтеводик. У нас, говорит, политика такая, мы здесь производим.
Bro, how do you see them actually winning? Listen, you have to, if a fascist country invades you, you have to defend it because the world is a better place when foreign policy decisions are not made by invading. Russia took the Donbass and Crimea in 2014 because they were mad they couldn't exert soft control over Ukraine via the electoral system. And then, unsatisfied with even that outcome, they did a full invasion. If you cede ground to them over and over, eventually Russia will just keep marching westward. Appeasement always fails. You want them to just then they would just invade again and take all Ukraine. They keep doing this. They did it with Georgia. They did it with fucking Crimea and the Donbass. They did it with Chechnya. They keep doing this. Look at Israel. Do you think Lebanon should just like cede territory to stop the bleeding? Apply your logic consistently. Do you think Hezbollah can win against the IDF? The answer is obviously no. So do you think that Hezbollah should just surrender southern Lebanon to Israel? No, you probably don't, because it's different there. Your logic is not consistent. I'm consistent. You do not allow appeasement. Israel and Russia will keep marching and killing and killing and killing until they are stopped. That's what these countries do. We've learned this lesson before. They've done this with Iran. Yeah, Iran should surrender, stop the bleeding, da-da-da. Lebanon ceded territory, unfortunately. Well, thankfully, the Lebanese government's not in charge of southern Lebanon, so it's not really up to them. What actual financial incentive does Russia have to give up? They're a petrostate, and the petro's getting blown up. What do you mean? What do you mean financial incentive? You're just arguing for appeasement again. You could do this to justify anything. You could do this to justify surrendering to Nazi Germany. It's boring. It's boring. The arguments are boring. 30 days. It's boring. They never, when people are doing this, they never respond to anything I say. You notice this? Like, I asked directly, how is this different from surrendering Lebanon? No answer to this. It's always just, you fall back to some, like, different point. You never engage with the failing logic of a specific train of thought. It's just move the goalpost, it's boring. Russia will continue this fight indefinitely until they are stopped. Like, they either win or they are stopped, and we will stop them. It's like talking to a toddler. They don't follow the conversation. They just stay stuck. Yeah. Very, very used to. The Zionists do the same thing. Very, very common. You think Ukraine should cede occupied territory in exchange for an otherwise favorable peace deal? What Ukraine decides to accept is up to them, but it's obvious that Russia has to be crushed and demilitarized. Russia, literally for 20 plus years now, has been using its military to bully and invade and subjugate former Soviet states. This is not just about Ukraine. It's about a former superpower with imperialist ambitions. What peace deal Ukraine decides to take is ultimately a decision and a compromise that they're going to have to settle on. But Russia can't be allowed to keep doing this. I don't really care so much about Ukraine's territorial integrity as I do stopping Russia. What do you think about Mearsheimer and Sachs saying? I don't care what these people think. They're literally like Russian agents.
Туда привозим назад то же самое, что увезли. И у нас получается чуть ли не в 3 раза. Я сам ветеран СВО, я участвовал в 22 году, я там был, я все это видел. То, что нам показывают по телевизору, и то, что там действительно происходит. Я там был в 22 году, я ни тюрьмы, ничего. Я простым добровольцем пошел. Это был у меня 2-й контракт по жизни. Я ушел в мае 22 года, буквально вот с заканчивания операции в Мариуполе. И до Марьинки, там то все. Я был в Луганске, в Донецке, участвовал в спецоперации. Я был, неважно, кем я был. Короче, я там был, я все это видел своими глазами. То, что у нас показывают, и то, что там происходит, 2 разные вещи. Там были контрактники, которые кадровые военные, и были мы добровольцы, и мы уже в эту кашу куда попали. Я вам скажу, это надо побывать, повидать.
It's all over when the last Ukraine conscript sent to storm Russia. It's naive to think who's winning, literally nobody is. No, Ukraine is winning right now. Like, objectively, unambiguously, Ukraine is winning. It's a war of aggression from Russia's part. Ukraine just has to defend. Russia is the one trying to invade. Russia's losing. They are experiencing far, far more casualties per month than Ukraine is. It's not an infinite stalemate. I know the war has gone on for a long time because Russia has seemingly no concern for any kind of strategic or tactical victories and is fine just endlessly sending its own citizens in to die. But Ukraine is winning. Not to mention the fact that the Russian fuel economy is collapsing right now. The entire country is facing shortages. And Russia relies on its fuel. Big ass country. No, Jahemirs, it would not. And it's not achievable within the necessary time frame. Eventually, Russia will be forced either to stop or to do a full a mass conscription. And when they do that, there will be additional internal struggles. Bankruptcy, no fuel, no equipment, mass conscription. It'll fall eventually. What do you think of forceful conscriptions in UK and the talk of refusing male refugees from Ukraine and Europe asylum to keep conscriptions high? I mean, yeah, it really sucks. But the alternative is letting Russia win. And if Russia wins, they're just going to do it again. Unfortunately, Russia represents such a massive existential threat to the world that the defending country is obliged to quite a bit of nasty behavior. The Soviet Union did this and far worse when Nazi Germany invaded. Do you have a problem with that? You realize that, right? When Nazi Germany invaded the Soviet Union, the Soviets did conscriptions. Oh boy, did they do conscriptions. Anything and everything Ukraine is doing right now is just a tiny, tiny, pale imitation of how silly the Soviet Union went with it. Didn't you say a few weeks ago Germany was fear-mongering that Russia isn't an existential threat? They're not an existential threat to Germany in terms of their ground army, so long as Ukraine holds, and right now Ukraine is doing far more than holding. They're an existential threat in the sense that over the long run, the political and military threat they pose to the stability of the region and the world is significant, but they are not going to fucking ground invade Germany, which is what Germany wants you to believe, which is why they're pumping bajillions into their defense industry. And I'm totally consistent on this, by the way. It's the reason why I have such a maximalist position on Iran stopping the United States and Israel. Totally consistent over here. I've said that Iran basically has unlimited license to defend itself against America and Israel because the creep of imperialist aggression from those two countries in the Middle East threatens global peace to such an extent that Iran has basically like unlimited moral license in defending itself. I'm saying exactly the same thing for Ukraine. Does it suck? Absolutely. Russia should stop. Israel should stop, etc., etc. It remains sad. It's not, it's not like great.
Да, у нас есть такие средства, которые защищают нас от всей правды. Но они сильно нас защищают. Правда есть, ее показывают, но маленечко не все. Там
что
просто...
отличается? Из того, что можно называть.
Да ничего нельзя называть. Если я сейчас назову, а вы это покажете, мне завтра придут, руки-ноги скрутят.
Well, you do have a lot of Western chauvinists that ignore your anti-Zionist takes in favor of your pro-Ukrainian takes. I really don't think a lot of people in my community ignore my anti-Zionist takes. You'd have to be insane to watch me. Like, every stream is me screaming, tie me to a missile and fire me to Tel Aviv. What do you mean by that? Everyone in my community is in lockstep on my positions on the threat Zionism poses to world peace.
There have been so many losses. Honestly, I can count my surviving classmates on the fingers of one hand.
What was all this for? Everyone had enough, right? And then suddenly something happened.
The Donbas region belongs to us. Everything that we have planned will eventually be ours. Vladimir Putin.
Why don't you read out the subtitles for people speaking other languages? Because I'm reading chat and the thing, and it's just a little tedious to read it out loud because I want to comment on it as well.
A truly great man, no matter what you might think of him.
It's like all these Vladimir Putins are very different. People still say there are many of them. So
there really aren't that many people who still support Putin these days, I mean, I used to be a supporter myself, but lately I've been having a few serious doubts.
What do you think Putin's presidency will be remembered for, and what will be written in history books?
Boys, I don't know, honestly. I'm quite old. I don't understand politics at all.
I'm just an old woman. Sorry.
I understand that Putin wants no one to die and everything to be good.
I don't understand. I'm just an old man. I don't understand politics. All I know is the Fuhrer has our best interests at heart. Yeah. Send your ass to the fucking front lines. See how long you last in a trench.
You see, it turns out it's the opposite.
40 years old.
Ukraine wants to keep the war going regardless. That's how I see it, boys. I don't know about you, but this Zelensky is an idiot. He's destroying his own people, and our boys are dying.
Damn, it's like I'm listening to YouTube chat.
So, I don't know, guys, how it's all going to end.
Do you truly believe that it is still worth our while to keep on going?
I think it's high time we wrap this up, right? What's the point of all this? Everyone had enough, right? And then suddenly something happened. So what's it all for? Maybe it's about the money, guys.
What would count as a victory in the global conflict with Ukraine?
That is actually a very difficult question to answer. Are you talking about victory? I don't know. I can't say.
Do you think the losses sustained over these years were justified?
That is also a rather provocative question for you to ask. Will they all be like that? I really cannot say for sure.
It's so many losses, honestly. I can count my living classmates on one hand, even though I'm like 30. Roughly speaking, they all went to the SVO.
In your opinion, what would count as a victory?
The country's leader will consider it a victory. But I think if Ukraine surrenders completely, Zelensky will say, that's it, I'm pulling these troops out, and that's that. And these attacks on our city, on the country, will stop.
What are your thoughts? Do you think it is possible? And what is the expected time frame?
I believe that we can expect to see it happen within about 5 years' time.
Jesus,
not anytime in the near future, actually.
You want 5 more years of this for a total Ukrainian surrender?
You mentioned the president. What will his true legacy be? And how will it be remembered by the public in the years to come?
The fact that he ruled for so long, that's probably the most important thing, yeah, that it was for such a long time.
What will the textbooks have to say?
Well, they'll probably write about the special military operation and also that Crimea was returned. And Donetsk and Luhansk were returned too.
What do you think would be considered a victory in this special...
See, it's like she seems like apolitical, and then you go one layer below the surface, and she's like, "Well, I'm just glad that Putin is engaging in the glorious reconquest of our rightful territories." And it's like, yeah, like Ukraine has to fucking annihilate this country. I'm sorry. You can't. This is why Russia is like this. You have made the population cattle, or like either in their ignorance or their indifference, and as a consequence, society remains at least passably stable while the oligarchs rape children and do whatever the fuck they want. Like Russia has to be brought to its knees to the point that it no longer supports the regime in Moscow. Also the same mindset in Israel. Yeah, they're like, yeah, I don't like Netanyahu. I think it's time we wrap this war up. Of course we should take Lebanon. Yeah. That's why it's so important to win.
Military operation in Ukraine.
What will be considered a victory?
But in my personal opinion, it is the achievement of the special operations goals.
Which ones are those then?
Denazification, demilitarization of Ukraine, and removal of threats.
Do you honestly believe that the losses we suffered in the war were truly justified?
War never comes without its heavy, painful losses. Therefore, it is ultimately justified.
What will Putin's rule be remembered for? What will be written in the history books?
Vladimir Putin is a man of great stature, regardless of how you might feel about him or his various actions. And that is precisely why I believe he will be remembered in history as a truly great ruler.
What would they actually write in the textbooks? Come on, be more specific without all that jargon.
He helped restore Russia's territorial integrity, bringing together lands that used to be part of the same country. Well, something like that.
How do you think the special military operation in Ukraine will end?
I really don't know. I cannot even imagine it.
Well, many of our respondents have told us that they believe it will end in a total victory. What exactly do you think they mean when they use that word? Or speaking for yourself, what do you mean by the word victory in this specific context?
Well, I understand that there's a bias in these interviews because they don't want to speak ill of the regime, but I feel like they could probably hit a middle... but that's what keeps you cattle, right? Like, the Russian government literally does not have the ability to suppress mass, rioting. It's crazy there's not mass rioting. Like, seriously, these provincial towns, it just literally, if everyone was like, oh, we're done pretending. I understand you could say this about, any country. People say this about us. Yeah, but we're just not like Russia. That's the thing. We are bad, but the average standard of living in America is totally incomparable to Russia. You know? Maybe one day we'll get to that point. I think if Americans ever got to this point, society would have collapsed already because of our treat-the-right tendencies, you know? It is a kind of learned helplessness. They have an entire branch of the military specifically for riot suppression. I know, but they would lose. Russia does not have the ability to suppress mass discontent. They absolutely do. I strongly disagree. I guess we'll never know because these people never fucking riot. Maybe they will after the next wave of conscriptions. Or they're killed? Yeah, but right now their government is killing hundreds of thousands of them every year. Anyway, I promise you, the number of protesters Russia would kill in a mass uprising would just be a tiny fraction of how many they're sacrificing to Ukrainian drones in the front line. Well, the mass conscriptions will happen eventually, and then maybe you'll get the riots. Who knows? Tried to date a Russian woman who lives in the US. She was MAGA and pro-Russian, said they're both patriots. Love Dubai. Phenomenal. How do we stop this from happening again? I mean, the West, it was complicit over so much of why Russia is the way it is today. There are things you can do to keep this from happening. You're assuming riots would work. They typically don't work in Russia. When was the last time there was a mass uprising against the government? A real one. I'm aware that after the beginning of the war, there were some, but they were pretty damn small. It's been a while. I think they're just buck broken, man. This is what's going to happen to us. It's the great apathy death. If you get people used to being, downtrodden and people have no hope for the future, you can get away with basically everything. You think conscripting the civilian populace is ever justified? I mean, yeah, Ukraine's doing it. The Soviet Union did it when the Nazis invaded.